Hello, welcome to the Office of National Scholarships Advisement Pathways to Federal Employment for Undergraduate session. My name is Shay Masterson. I'm the Program Manager of Outreach and Inclusion with ONSA, and I'm so excited to share with you today some of the different fellowship opportunities we advise on that can support you if you have plans, goals, desires to eventually work for the federal government. So to get us started, here's just a brief overview of what we'll cover today. I'm going to first introduce kind of just national scholarships in general and our office, the Office of National Scholarships Advisement, or ONSA, to you in case you're new to our office. Then we'll go over the different pathways, types of pathways to federal employment provided through various scholarship and fellowship opportunities. Those include just gaining professional experience that's related to federal employment, non-competitive eligibility awards, so things that would offer you that eligibility in the future, and then ones that come with some kind of service commitment, so that actually require you to work for the federal government in the future if you were to receive them. And then we'll break down kind of options within each of those categories. And then we'll wrap up with some next steps if any or more than one of these awards are of interest to you, what you can do moving forward to kind of plan ahead, get started with that process. So first, what are national scholarships? These are not your typical scholarships that you may be thinking of to attend ASU that cover your general tuition and fees. They're a little bit more kind of bigger, broader than that. So first of all, the one component that makes them national or international in some cases is the applicant pool. So these awards are not just available to ASU students, they're available to students across the country and sometimes across the globe. So who is able to apply for them and ultimately receive these awards is part of what makes them national or international. The funding source for any one of these awards is also going to contribute to it being national or international. Again, these aren't funded by ASU. They're not state funded. They're funded on a national or international level. So this can be from the federal government. Many of the ones that we're going to talk about today are funded by federal agencies at that level. Other national scholarships might be funded by private foundations or large corporations, but that funding comes from some kind of national or international agency or organization. All of the awards our office advises on are extremely competitive because the funding comes from these kind of larger entities and the applicant pool is more vast. That innately makes them more competitive than maybe a lot of the scholarships that you've already applied for or received in the past. Some of the awards we advise on have a selection rate as high as like say 25%. But most of them are going to be even lower selection rate than that. So the average, I would say, for the 100 or so awards our office focuses on is maybe a 10% selection rate. Some have even less, like a 1 to 3% selection rate. So they're very competitive and prestigious because of just what they provide, who provides them, and how competitive they are. There's a lot of prestige that comes along with the title of having won one of these particular scholarships or fellowships. Definitely things you can put on your resume, although that's not the reason to pursue a national scholarship or fellowship. But by and large, they're also experiential. So this is where they're not necessarily just your traditional scholarships that you think of comes in. For undergraduate students, most of the awards we advise on do not provide general academic funding. And even if they do provide general academic funding, they also come with a lot more than that. That experience can be studying abroad, learning a language, building your professional network, developing your leadership skills, having a professional internship or research experience. So it often either includes or is solely an experiential opportunity to kind of build your skills and experience towards whatever future plans you have. Now, of course, the ones we're going to focus on today are part of building your experience that can help you gain federal employment in the future. Although we advise on roughly 100 awards in our office, so what each one of them provides, the pathway that they're focused on for your future is going to vary by each one. And even all of the ones that we talk about today aren't necessarily just for those who want to pursue a path of federal employment. Some of them are, but they can also be beneficial for a variety of future career or professional pathways you might be pursuing. So in a nutshell, this kind of is the best general description we can give of national scholarships. But above all else, these awards are also very mission driven. So what we mean by that is whoever is funding this award, whoever's established this award, they have a particular mission or purpose that they are aiming to fulfill. And the scholarship or fellowship is one way or the way that this entity is aiming to fulfill that mission. So with ones that are funded by, say, the Department of State, which many of these we'll talk about today are funded by the Department of State, right? Their general mission is related to U.S. diplomacy efforts, right? Improving U.S. relations with international entities and individuals. So pretty much all of the awards that are funded by the Department of State are in some form or fashion a way of hopefully improving diplomatic relations between the US and other countries or people in other countries, okay? Again, each individual award and funder of each individual award is gonna vary exactly what that mission is, but just keep in mind that all of these do have some kind of mission that they're looking to fulfill. And they're looking for applicants who share that mission in some way and can help propel that mission forward in some way, okay? So they want to know you as an applicant, kind of want to drive forward that particular mission as well, and that you have the potential to support that mission both while you're receiving the scholarship or fellowship and in the future. So what does ONSA do? So these are the kind of awards we focus on are the national scholarships and fellowships that I kind of gave you a rough understanding or description of just now. But what our office does is kind of multidimensional when it comes to national scholarships. So we do not provide these scholarships. Again, they're all coming from external entities, but we work within the ASU community to inform ASU students and alumni of awards that they may be best suited for or interested in based on, you know, your academic interest, your extracurricular activities, the level of academic merit you've performed at. So we inform the population about what kinds of national scholarships there are out there. And then we provide a lot of guidance and support around deciding to apply for those scholarships and especially the actual application process. So most of our work actually is spent giving small group or one-on-one direction, guidance, and feedback on application materials. So that can be done through workshops, through open office hours or writing hours, as well as individualized feedback on your application materials. Then if you are selected for an interview, many of the awards we'll talk about today will have an interview component, although across the board with the awards we advise on, some do and some do not have an interview component. But if you are applying for one of these that does have an interview component and you are chosen to participate in an interview, that guidance and support also extends to preparing for those interviews. So we'll set up mock interviews for you, give you feedback on your interview responses. So really beginning to end support and guidance around the application process for national scholarships. If there is an award that requires nomination or endorsement by your university, then typically our office is the one that manages that process. So we'll note that on our website if an award requires nomination or endorsement. That doesn't mean you have to have a professor or a dean or somebody actually say, oh, I nominate this student for this award. You will likely need some of those folks to write letters of recommendation, because most of these will require at least one, if not more than one letter of recommendation. But the nomination or endorsement means you submit your application by a preliminary deadline for the award, and then there's a campus committee that will be convened to review your application materials along with all others from ASU, and then they decide who gets nominated or endorsed to be considered for the actual scholarship and who does not. In some cases, we are limited as a university to how many we can nominate or endorse for any particular award, and in some cases we are not limited. So even the nomination or endorsement is going to vary depending on each individual award. And there's really only, maybe like 10 or so awards that require nomination or endorsement that we focus on. But again, if it does require that, our office manages the process. We don't decide who's nominated, we just manage the process of nomination. So kind of, if you're interested in pursuing national scholarships and fellowships, our office is here to support you, and these are the ways that we're here to support you on the path of pursuing these kinds of awards. I already covered that. So we're going to move on to the different kinds of pathways to federal employment through some of these national scholarships and fellowships. So the first one is really just, these are opportunities where you can gain firsthand professional experience as an undergraduate student if you have an interest in maybe working for the federal government in the future. It would be really great if you had a federal internship while you're an undergraduate student. Gaining federal employment can be very challenging. It's very competitive just applying for federal jobs. And so if you've already had an internship at the federal level, then that can just boost your resume and application materials when you eventually apply for those federal jobs in the future. So some of these that our office, there's many opportunities out there with the federal government as an undergraduate student, but ones that our office gives particular focus to are 3 different opportunities that are all through the Department of State. The first one is their virtual federal service internships. So these are actually remote opportunities open to students across the country to gain federal professional experience. You can apply for these at any level of undergraduate or graduate studies. They typically have ones during the fall, spring, and maybe even summer session. They are generally unpaid opportunities, but it's a great stepping stone to build your experience towards that path. And it's helpful if you're thinking about maybe federal employment is a path you want to go on. This is a way to not just gain that experience, but also help you decide if that's actually something that you want to do. A lot of times when we do internships as undergraduates, that's part of the process, is confirming for ourselves, yes, we do want to pursue this kind of professional path, or maybe we don't. And all of these internship programs, they don't have any commitment or requirement associated with them beyond the internship, which we'll talk about that in a moment. So they're a great opportunity to just find out for yourself if you actually want that experience or not. And then if you do the internship and ultimately do decide you want to pursue federal employment, they'll definitely boost your resume in that realm. The next level, this is for upper division undergraduates or graduate students, so it's a little bit more advanced opportunities. This is the U.S. Department of State just student internship program. These are typically in-person opportunities, oftentimes in Washington, D.C., although not necessarily only in Washington, D.C., but they do happen in person specifically, and they are paid. So it would be great to maybe do a virtual one as an early undergrad and then step into an in-person one later in undergrad or as a graduate student. That could be a definite pathway of kind of building that experience overall. And then last but not least that we'll talk about today is the Foreign Service Internship Program. So this is if you're specifically interested, not just working with the federal government, but working within the foreign service of the federal government. So these are folks who are kind of diplomats in some form or fashion. You can work in the Foreign Service in multiple different agencies with the federal government, but with the Department of State, which is the largest department of foreign service officers out there, you can do the Foreign Service Internship Program, which is a 2-year summer internship program where you would spend the first summer doing a domestic internship in Washington, D.C., and then the second summer would be spent doing a internship abroad at an embassy in another country. So you do have to be a second or third year undergraduate to apply. They want you to have already 1 year under your belt of undergraduate studies, and at least the current year and another year remaining in undergraduate studies when you apply for this particular program, because you still need to be technically an undergrad kind of when you're going into that second summer internship. And again, all of these just great stepping stones to build that experience and also help you decide if you ultimately want to pursue one of these types of career paths. Another kind of way to get your foot in the door with federal employment in the future is by being an alumni of some scholarship programs that offer non-competitive eligibility for federal employment, or NCE is what it's often called. What non-competitive eligibility means is that when you apply for a federal job that you are eligible for, if you apply for a federal job that you're not eligible for, it is not going to, non-competitive eligibility is not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. You have to at least meet the eligibility and then still pass like any background checks that are required or anything like that. But if you find a federal job that you're eligible for and interested in, and you have non-competitive eligibility because of participation in one of these scholarship programs previously, then when you apply for that program, it kind of bumps you to the top of the applicant pool. So you get considered ahead of a lot of other applicants, and it can also speed up the process of applying and interviewing and being accepted into one of these positions. It doesn't guarantee that, but it definitely helps you in the path of federal employment. So it's typically offered for 1 year's time after you've received the scholarship, although that can be extended for special circumstances, typically up to 3 years after the participation in the program. But the 3 scholarships that specifically offer non-competitive eligibility to their alumni. So if you receive one of these, you will automatically receive that non-competitive eligibility if you follow through with the scholarship opportunity. The first one is the Gilman International Scholarship, which is to provide funds towards any credit-bearing study abroad program while you're still an undergraduate student. You do specifically have to be a Pell Grant recipient to be eligible for the Gilman International Scholarship, but if you're planning to study abroad or want to study abroad and you're a Pell Grant recipient, you can and should apply for the Gilman International Scholarship to help fund that study abroad experience. And then it would garner you that non-competitive eligibility after you've completed your study abroad program. Then there's the Critical Languages Scholarship, which is specifically for if you want to study one of 14 or 15 different languages that are offered through the program. You can apply to learn whichever language is of interest to you and that you're eligible for. About half of them require previous study, and about half of them require no previous study. So it just kind of depends on what makes the most sense for you and what you would be eligible for based on your current language skills. But if you are interested in one of these languages and you are eligible, you can apply to participate in a fully funded summer immersion program that will take place in a country where that language is spoken. So you do a language and cultural immersion opportunity. You can actually receive the Critical Languages Scholarship up to 2 times. And you can apply anytime as an undergraduate or as a graduate student to the CLS program. And last but not least is the Fulbright U.S. student program. So this is for you to spend an academic year abroad after you already have your bachelor's degree. So you can be a graduating senior when you apply, you can be an undergraduate alumni when you apply, you can be a current graduate student when you apply. You just cannot already have your PhD when you apply. Once you have earned your PhD, then you're no longer eligible for the Fulbright U.S. student program, but pretty much anytime from after you have your bachelor's degree until you have a PhD, as long as you're still, then you're eligible for the Fulbright U.S. student program to spend an academic year abroad, either doing further academic study at a university in that country, doing research in that country, or teaching English in that country. So for academic study and research, there's about 150 different countries that you can be applying to for the Fulbright U.S. student program. And for English teaching assistantship, there's about 80 countries that you can apply to through the Fulbright U.S. student program. And if you do any of these 3 awards at any time in your academic journey, then afterwards you would be afforded that non-competitive eligibility if you were to apply to a federal job within 12 years of completing that particular program. Almost last but not least, there's another slide that revolves around service commitment, are the awards that have some kind of service commitment. So these are funded by a federal agency. They provide you with funds for your academic studies and or study abroad experiences, depending on the particular program. And then they actually require you. So they're not just offering you the opportunity to build your skills or get non-competitive eligibility for federal employment. They're actually going to require you to work at the federal level for a particular agency or in a particular role, or just in general with the federal government after you've completed the program. So exactly what that looks like is going to vary for each one. If you are planning to go into a health field specifically, so becoming a public health official or being a healthcare provider, the NIH, or National Institutes of Health, Undergraduate Scholarship Program is for those who have plans to go into the health fields and be healthcare providers and are also of high financial need. Then you can receive the NIH Undergraduate Scholarship to help fund your undergraduate studies, as well as to participate in summer internships with NIH sites. And then after you've completed your undergraduate studies, the expectation is that for each year that you've received the scholarship, because if you apply, say, as a first year, then you could be receiving the scholarship for your second, third, and fourth year of undergrad. If you apply as a third year, you would only then be receiving it for your fourth year of undergrad, so it would only be 1 year. So for however many years you receive the scholarship, you're expected to commit that many years to working with the NIH after you've graduated. So it not just gives you the experience, but there's also that expectation and kind of a direct pipeline into working with the NIH when you're done. Then there's the SMART scholarship with the Department of Defense. So if you're in a STEM field and you're interested in doing Department of Defense work in the future, especially like research-based work in those STEM fields, then the SMART Scholarship as an undergraduate or graduate student can help fund your studies. You also participate in at least one summer internship with the Department of Defense site. And then it's kind of expected that you would commit to working with the Department of Defense in your particular field. They're really looking for folks who plan for long-term careers with the Department of Defense, but typically you need to work with them for however many years you receive the scholarship, at least that many years of employment after you're done with your academic studies. And then last but not least is the Boren Scholarship. This is so that you can study abroad and learn a critical language through your study abroad experience. Typically, that experience needs to be at least 6 months to a year, although at minimum, it has to be at least 12 weeks, but they prefer 6 months. And if you're a STEM student, there are special allowances for you to do shorter term study abroad experiences, typically at least 8 weeks long. So that can be completed like over the summer. It doesn't have to be during the academic year. But you can apply for the Boren Scholarship to fund your study abroad experience so that you can learn one of the languages deemed critical to U.S. interest by the Department of Defense. And if that's the case and you receive the scholarship and you go on the study abroad experience, then once you're done with your academic studies, the expectation would be that you work for at least 1 year with a federal agency in a role that has national security interest. So it doesn't deem that you have to work with the Department of Defense or with a particular agency in general, or even within a specific position, but in broad terms, it does have to be a national security aligned opportunity that you work within to fulfill the Boren commitment. Taking these kind of even a step further are the Foreign Service Fellowships. So there's a handful of fellowships that if you are specifically interested in working in the foreign service of the federal government in the future, then these scholarships would all provide you with academic funding, professional experience, and then require you to work with the Foreign Service for a minimum of 5 years after you're done with your academic studies. All of these are for 2-year graduate programs, although one of them can also be for the final 2 years of an undergraduate program, and we'll talk about that. So if you want to work with the Department of State's Foreign Service in the future, then there's Pickering and Rangel, which will fund graduate studies, and then you would become a Foreign Service officer with the Department of State after your master's degree is complete and after the fellowship is complete. So that's kind of a generalist within the Foreign Service. If you have an interest in being a little bit more specialized within the IT field of the Foreign Service, so not becoming a Foreign Service officer, but becoming an information management specialist within the Foreign Service, then you can apply for the FATE, the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. And this is the one that can fund either your remaining 2 years of undergraduate studies or 2 years of a master's degree. So that's kind of what you're 2 years of funding either for the undergrad or the graduate degree. And then afterwards, you would begin working as an information management specialist within the Foreign Service for 5 years after you're done with that program. And then if you want to be a diplomatic security agent, so these are folks that keep the individuals within the Foreign Service safe during that service, then you could apply for the Clark Diplomatic Security Special Service Agent Fellowship. Same thing, funds 2 years of master's degree studies that are affiliated with, that would kind of prepare you for that field, provides the internship opportunities while you're in the master's degree program, and then you would eventually become a diplomatic security agent and be committing to a minimum of 5 years of that when you are done with the program. If you want to work with the Foreign Service with one of the other agencies, not the Department of State, there is a fellowship to become a Foreign Service officer with USAID. Those are more development focused Foreign Service officers, not as much diplomatic, but development focused. Then you'd be looking at applying for the PAIN fellowship specifically. That is another one only for graduate studies, 2-year graduate studies programs. Oftentimes, there are students who are interested in Pickering, Rangel, and PAIN. Sometimes they're only interested in Pickering and Rangel. Sometimes they're only interested in PAIN. Whatever is the case for you is fine, but just know that the fellowships and the benefits of these are more or less the same. You would just be working for different agencies as a Foreign Service officer. And then a little bit more niche is the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They have their Foreign Agricultural Services Foreign Service officers. And so there's also a fellowship if you want to go into the agricultural services of the Foreign Service specifically. So you have to be very agriculture, agribusiness focused in your studies and career pursuit. And if that's of interest, then you can pursue a master's degree through the USDA fellowship and get that funding and internship experience, and then be committing to working in the Foreign Service in the future. So these programs, they're not just getting the experience, they're not just getting that non-competitive eligibility, they're actually setting you up very directly to kind of work in those fields and having some level of commitment to actually working in these fields. If you ever receive one of these that requires a service commitment and then you don't ultimately fulfill that service commitment, you can become responsible to repay funds that you've received through those particular programs. So that's important to keep in mind. So if you're interested in any of these awards, some next steps, I'd like you to go to our website, onsa.asu.edu. You can follow the direct link or the QR code that's on the screen. Once you get to our website, onsa.asu.edu, there's a few things that I want to point out to you. Oh, this didn't save my arrows. Oh, there they are. Okay. So first, you can find these awards and the 90 or so other awards that our office advises on if you go to the scholarships tab. The scholarships tab will list out all of the awards we advise on, what they provide, what the application process is, who's eligible, as well as direct links to those particular awards. So it's a good idea to explore any of these that we've discussed, and also just take a look at that scholarship database to see if there's other awards that you might be interested in as well. If and when you're ready, you can schedule an advising appointment with our office to discuss either just national scholarships in general, or if you have one that you want to apply for and it's time to apply for that award, then that's how you can schedule advising appointments to get guidance and feedback on that specific application. If that application is not open for the current cycle, then you won't necessarily want to have advising quite yet for that specific application. You typically want to wait until that application opens. If you haven't already, signing up for our weekly bulletin through our main page is a great idea, because in that weekly bulletin, we will announce when applications are open, when specific applications are open and receiving applications at that time, which is a good signal for when to have an advising appointment and when to start working on that application. We also announce other information sessions we have, like this one, which in some cases go into more depth about particular awards and the applications for those particular awards. Another good signal for getting started with an individual application is when those information sessions are happening, although we don't necessarily offer information sessions for every single award that we advise on, but a lot of them that we discussed today, we do. And then we announce upcoming deadlines. We announce when we have nominees and winners for particular awards. So it's a great way to just stay up to date and in the know about what's kind of going on in terms of national scholarships. So those are really the three next steps I recommend to you. Checking out the database as needed, scheduling advising appointments as needed, and just signing up for that weekly bulletin to stay up to date on national scholarships. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. Moving forward, again, if you have any questions, I'll be following up via email with those who have attended. If you're viewing this after the fact as a recording, you can also go to the Contact Us tab of our website, and my information, Shay Masterson, will be there, as well as all of our other advisors if you have a question for somebody else in our office. Or you can just contact our general office email address as well. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.